Welcome back to The Price of Business. I'm your host, Kevin Price, talking to you about you and your business. It's your business to keep track of the various organizations out there fighting for our individual liberty and educating a better public to maintain a republic. And one of those groups is the Independent Institute. And David Theroux is the founder and president of that organization. And I love your stuff. I look for it all the time. I use it usually with crediting you guys, but sometimes I just blatantly steal it because I just get so darn excited. But I always try to give you guys credit whenever I can because you do great work.
Well, thank you, Kevin. It's a pleasure to be with you.
You bet. Kind of give us the overview of the history of the organization.
Well, the Institute was founded by me in 1986. And we are what's called the Public Policy Research Institute. It's a mouthful, but what we do is we have many fellows, economists, and historians and others who do studies, and we produce a lot of books. And we also are very involved in the public square as far as being involved in debate over many social and economic issues. Our calling basically is to do the kind of work that can hold up to any kind of scrutiny by critically looking at the effects of government policy, especially pertaining to a tradition of values that undergird certainly Western civilization and the idea of free and prosperous society. And our grounding is essentially to advance peaceful, prosperous, and free societies, grounded in a commitment to human worth and dignity. Mm-hmm. And most people, I think, instinctively understand that we have some serious problems, and so we're very active on virtually every front as far as public issues are concerned.
Yeah, so it seems like every one of these organizations, these nonprofit think tanks, they all have their unique niche. I would think, for example, in a way, I would say Heritage has become kind of the neocon place to go. It was New Right, and I guess New Right really means neoconservative, doesn't it? But it's become kind of the neoconservative place. I think Cato is the small L libertarian, occasionally even big L libertarian with this attitude, approach to public policy. Where would you fit into that niche?
Well, I think the way to view us is that we're not really in sort of a niche in that way. Our focus is what's called the natural law tradition, which is what America's founders all subscribed to. They believe that there was certain natural laws in morality and in economics, and they believe that power corrupts, and they wanted to radically constrain the power of the state because they knew that as Washington said, it's a dangerous servant, but can get out of hand easily. It's like a fire that can spread. And so we believe in individual liberty. We believe in personal responsibility. We also believe in the virtues that are crucial to any sort of humane society. And we think they're all interactive. They're all essentially interdependent. And so we would be certainly in the tradition of anyone who has written or subscribes today to the ideas of liberty and free society.
Kind of a classical liberal.
Classical liberal is one way to describe it. A lot of people get confused by that term also, but I think that most people instinctively understand what this is about. It's the idea that individuals should be left free to make their own choices, but be held accountable for those choices.
Yeah, absolutely. And really, of all the economic systems, none has a stronger basis in morality than capitalism. And unfortunately, the vast majority of our culture today equates capitalism to the crony capitalism we see pervasive. Not only is in terms of big business, but business in general. And it's so contrary to what it originally was intended to be like.
That's right. And, of course, with Adam Smith and others, and actually this goes back to the Middle Ages, influenced by writers like Thomas Aquinas and others, and, of course, goes back to the teachings in the New Testament and the Old Testament with the Ten Commandments and so forth.
And
these
even
moral
even
precepts
the
are
even
fundamental.
even the monasteries of Spain, right?
That's right, absolutely. The monasteries of Spain, for example, at the University of Salamanca in the Middle Ages, was where really very advanced economic insights were developed to a very sophisticated level. In fact, they had developed it so well. Later, other traditions, including that of Adam Smith, actually made mistakes that the so-called Spanish scholastics had solved. But the point here is that liberty and morality and prosperity are all intertwined. And a free society that's based on this moral code and the rule of law also happens to be the most productive. And that's why when people are left free to make their own choices, they can create enterprises, they can innovate, they can hire other people, they can move and look at opportunities in ways that they can't if they're simply overlorded by some monarch or some despot that makes the decisions for them.
Yeah. Yeah, and by the way, I'm looking at the website. You know, I think I've had emails exchanges about this. By the way, it's independent.org, but you're also the founder and president of the C.S. Lewis Society of California. I, too, am a huge C.S. Lewis fan. Also like Francis Schaeffer, both men, very different in how they approach things, but both realize that the problem of dualism in a Christian culture would mean that the Christian culture would be always subservient to the secular humanist one. I think that would be a true statement for both men.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And there's a wonderful book that compares Schaeffer and Lewis's views, incidentally. But both men, and Lewis in particular, but both were devoted to this natural law tradition. And Lewis himself would be considered to be a classical liberal. He was a big fan of James Madison. He was a big fan of Lord Acton. And throughout his fiction and nonfiction, many people, for example, may be familiar with his book series called The Chronicles of Narnia. In The Chronicles of Narnia, the so-called deep magic, which rules the country, is the natural law. And then in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, we discover the deeper magic, and that's essentially the grace of God through Christ, and Aslan is the Christ figure. But what Lewis wanted to do, and Tolkien also subscribed to this too, his good friend J.R.R. Tolkien, was they wanted to bring into the modern world these ideas and acquaint people and make them comfortable because they were very concerned about this sort of secular assault on these traditions and these great spiritual insights.
Are you talking about, by the way, on Lewis and Schaeffer? Are you talking about Scott Burson's book?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a great book. I read that years and years ago.
Exactly.
Strongly recommend that. And great to have this conversation. It's very difficult when you live in a country with mob rule, though, to see these principles be essentially devoured by the vast ignorance and the exploitation by an elite. Don't you think?
I do think so. And one of the great ironies about this is that liberty came out of this Judeo-Christian tradition, again, this natural law tradition that there's objective morality and that the civil law should reflect the natural law and not step beyond it. And one of the great ironies here is that idea of liberty was that people can make mistakes and they will then be held accountable for the mistakes, but they should be free to make the choices. And in the modern era actually is described by scholars as having started essentially about 200 or 300 years ago. And in the modern era, a different tradition developed, which actually is reestablishing a pre-Christian view. And this view is that there's no God, there's no objective morality, there's no objective truth, and so forth. And in that sort of confusion, the idea that we have to control people because they'll make choices that we don't want, essentially, and they're simply robots that are programmed by the environment or by genes or something. There's something that's developed in the course of these writings, which is really sort of an authoritarian view, and I call that the secular theocracy.
Yes.
And the secular theocracy is not just things like not allowing prayer in schools and the Ten Commandments in a courthouse or something like that. It's really more the nanny state, the therapeutic state. it's really trying to control people's lives. And it's a pernicious thing. Lewis wrote a great deal about it. The Founding Fathers were against this kind of a view.
Where did Lewis write about that, by the way?
Well, Lewis wrote, there's many quotes by him. I actually have an article on our website called C.S. Lewis on Mere Liberty and the Evils of Statism, which people are welcome to look at, which was published in many different outlets. And it pulls together Lewis's comments about all these ideas, and it's amazing how essentially prophetic he was of what has come into being instead of this postmodern nihilism on the one hand and this sort of authoritarian secular theocracy on the other hand. And you see it every day. I mean, there's movements to ban all sorts of things that you eat and drink.
Yeah, which, by the way, goes hand in hand with the state that provides your health care, right?
That's right, exactly.
They control your health care.
Is part of this secular theocratic view that the government is going to run your health care.
Listen, if you're getting our free health care, you got to eat and drink like we tell you you're going to eat and drink.
That's right, and you can see how it goes into essentially trying to overrule religious convictions. And that's part of so the idea that there's a secular standard that everyone has to conform to, or you go to prison.
David, I got to wrap it up. My producer's having a cardiac right in front of me. In fact, I'm going to have to call Obamacare right after the break. But let me ask you, can I reprint at least part of that article and lead it back to your website on C.S. Lewis? Because I was looking at it. Phenomenal. I was supposed to talk about Duck Dynasty, but like always, I talk about whatever I want to talk about, which is sometimes problematic. We're going to get you back on that because that issue hasn't gone away. And I think it really it spoke volumes of how out of sync the elite is from the larger culture here in this country. But we'll have to have that conversation at another time.
Happy to do so.
Independent.org, David Theroux. What a great guest. Thanks so much. I had a lot of fun.
Thank you, Kevin.
When we come back, much more for you. I do want to remind you that article by C.S. Lewis, that can be found at usdailyreview.com. You can find it over there in the politics page, and check that out. More for you right after this on The Price of Business.
Getting so strong.